And I've also had the pleasure to...
Once in a while?
Once a week?
I've also had the pleasure to hear Lauren's lectures, and they're always very thought-provoking, and he knows a lot, being a financial man and an economist. He knows a lot about this book by Joseph Stiglitz, who is a Nobel laureate economist, and he says that the Iraq War that Paul Wolfowitz said was going to cost nothing because of the revenue from the Iraqi oil is going to end up costing us $3 trillion plus. Now what that means, $3 trillion, to put that into perspective, the health care that we've been squabbling about for the last couple of months, $3 trillion will pay that for 30 years. Which would you rather have? Lauren?
I've got to say, I wasn't, I really didn't know exactly what to talk about. I know this book fairly well. I've used it in my lectures in economics. Basically, what I would like to do this evening is I'm going to take 20 minutes. I promise not to do any. Somebody stop me at 20 minutes because I can go on for hours. Usually have to send in pizza when I talk. I will give you some background. I happen to be opposed to the war, okay? I'm opposed to it from a moral standpoint because I lived through the Vietnam era. No, I'm not a veteran. They tried. I went for the draft physical. There are a few things that stand out in your mind. One of them that does is when you're called at 4 o'clock in the morning to go for your draft physical. I will admit two things. One, I come from a wealthy family. My mother told my dad to keep me out of the Vietnam War. That was not feasible. Yeah, Dad tried to pull a few strings. Yes, he was wealthy. Yes, we lived in D.C. Yes, I had connections. No, everybody goes for a draft physical. It so happens that I did not make it through the draft physical. I got to the last stage. I had had some knee operations, and they said, no, you're not eligible for the military. But I lost friends in that war. So, I know what that war is about. I'm sorry, I don't like the subject of Vietnam. It's just, I lost a lot of friends, that stupid thing. I know what this war is about. I'm opposed to it, but that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. I'm going to show you how you cannot afford this war. That's the critical part. As an economist, I have looked at the numbers. I have studied Stiglitz. I have talked about Stiglitz. The issue is, as an economist, when you fight a war, if you're going to go out there and fight it, you've got one of three ways of paying for it. You can run a deficit. You can increase taxes. Or, what's the third thing? Deficit, taxes. Diane, where are you? What's the third one?
Cut social benefits.
Yeah, cut social program. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. It's my second talk today. We chose not to cut social programs. You have a very difficult time going up to people and saying, hey, I'm going to cut your Social Security, I'm going to cut Medicare, I'm going to cut whatever, the art programs, I'm going to cut school lunches, I'm going to cut things because we're going to go to war. That didn't fly. You can raise taxes. I have been in favor of, I have written about, I have talked about a war tax. If you're going to go fight a war, you need a war tax. We don't have a war tax. In this country, talking about raising taxes is about the worst thing you can do. Rick, if you want to not get elected, talk about raising taxes. What you do after you get elected, different ballgame. We cannot, nobody has even mentioned the fact of trying to raise taxes. So happens, you're going to see your income tax rate, if you make over $250,000 a year, you're going to see your taxes go up probably at the end of this year. Because some of the Bush taxes are expiring. The third thing you can do is what we did. We went into a deficit situation. Now, there are varying numbers. If you read that book, and if you haven't read it, I do recommend it. One gentleman said he couldn't get out of the library. Go to Amazon.com. It's not very, it's like $15 or something for the book. I didn't buy it in the hard copy. I bought the deluxe version. the war, the deficit that we are running, when this war was planned out, their argument was it would cost somewhere between 125 and $250 billion. I don't know what these people were smoking, but you have to understand that all my connections in DC tell me that that was a town I grew up in. That war was going to happen no matter what. It was planned, he wanted it. Part of the reason was his father, he felt, should have gone in and taken out Saddam when he had the opportunity, didn't do it. More importantly, the Bush family is an oil family, okay? They eat, sleep, and bleed oil. The object was, and Cheney's right in there with them, coming from Halliburton, the object, which I'm sure you've heard many times, we go in, we knock out this dictator, the people will love us, we'll take the oil, we'll put our companies in charge of the oil, we'll take revenues off of it, we solve our oil problem long term, which has been a problem that's been bothering this country for some time. Our companies that we're associated with after I leave the presidency get rich. And everybody goes away happy, we removed the dictator, and I'm a great president. A couple things went wrong on the way to the palace. The first is the people hate our guts. Let's face it, we are no heroes in the Middle East. I don't care, pick your country, nobody loves us. Secondly, the price tag was a little bit off. It wasn't 250 billion, it wasn't 500 billion, it wasn't 750 billion, it was much closer to $1 trillion out of pocket. That's what it cost us to fight this war. But that's only part of the cost. That's not the real cost. The real cost, if you read the book, is what happens to, first of all, these people are not working back here. Secondly, if you remember, after the Great Depression did not come to an end until basically World War II. Why World War II? Because the government, and if you want, come down to one of my economics classes, come to my office, I'll explain it to you in detail, but a tremendous amount of money was put into the economy. A stimulus program. Unfortunately, a war stimulus program, but a stimulus program nonetheless. Well, why isn't it working this time? It's very simple. That money is not going into the pockets of U.S. citizens. We don't have what we call a Keynesian multiplier effect. Because a multiplier effect is very simple. I give you $100, you spend it with Fred down the street, he spends it, he spends it, he spends it, and it goes through the economy, and you get a growing economy. When the money goes into the coffers of Pakistan and disappears, which is what, there was a case where, what was it? Some $7 or $15 billion disappeared overnight. They think this stuff is petty cash. It's our petty cash. It's not going into stimulating our economy. We don't have Rosie the Riveter anymore doing airplanes like we had in World War II. We have money going into sheiks' pockets, going into God knows where, and does not come back to the United States.